The great hall was filled with light and music as the day of the wedding finally arrived. The people of Lisari Prime gathered in celebration, their faces shining with hope and excitement. For the first time in many years, two worlds were joining as one. Jason stood beside Princess Alarin, dressed in ceremonial robes that shimmered like the night sky. He felt a mix of nerves and pride. The journey had been hard, full of tests, doubts, and danger. But now, it was time to take the final step. Alarin smiled at him, her eyes full of warmth. "Today, we begin a new story, Jason." Jason nodded. Together. The ceremony was unlike anything Jason had ever seen. The rose that had started it all was placed on a pedestal in the center of the hall. The priestess spoke in the Lisari language, and the crowd listened in respectful silence. When the moment came, Alarin took Jason's hand and gave him a single rose petal. It symbolized trust, love, and the promise to protect one another. Jason held the petal close to his heart. "I promise," he said, his voice steady. The crowd erupted in cheers, and music filled the air. Dancers moved gracefully, and lights sparkled like stars. After the ceremony, Jason and Alarin stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Below, the people celebrated the beginning of a new era, an era of unity between Earth and Lisari Prime. Jason thought about the rose on his table back in his room. It was more than a flower. It was a symbol of connection, courage, and hope. Alarin leaned on his shoulder. "You were brave to stay, Jason. Not just for me, but for our people." Jason smiled. "And you were brave to trust me." Together, they looked up at the twin moons shining brightly above. Their futures were joined, full of challenges, but also endless possibilities. Jason felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that they would do it together. Two worlds united by love, respect, and hope. The rose had welcomed him, and now it had given them both a new beginning. On the distant planet Velaris 9, where tall blue trees whispered secrets and strange stars shone in the sky, a young boy named Kellen lived with his family. Kellen was from Earth, but he had spent most of his life on this new world. The planet was home to many strange creatures and alien people called the Shari. The Shari were tall and graceful, with shining skin that glowed softly in the dark. Kellen had never seen anyone like Arilyn before. She was a Shari girl about his age. Her bright eyes sparkled like sapphires, and she moved as if she was part of the wind itself. Despite their differences, Kellen and Ari became friends. They did not speak the same language well, but they understood each other with smiles, laughter, and the language of kindness. Every afternoon, the two children met near the big crystal lake that shimmered under the twin suns. They would explore the glowing forests and tell stories through drawings in the dirt. Ari showed Kellen how to listen to the whispers of the trees, and Kellen shared tales from Earth about blue oceans and tall mountains. One evening, as the sun set and the stars began to glow softly above, Kellen and Ari sat on a hill overlooking the valley. The sky was filled with sparkling lights, some blue, some red, like 1,000 fireflies dancing in the dark. Kellen looked at Ari and felt something deep inside his heart. "I will marry you when I grow up," Kellen said quietly, holding out a small wooden ring he had carved himself from a fallen branch. Ari laughed, a sound like music, and touched the ring with her delicate fingers. "You are still a little boy," she teased gently. "But I like your promise." Kellen smiled. "I mean it," he said firmly. "No matter what happens, I will come back for you." Ari's eyes shone with hope and a little sadness. The two friends sat together in silence, watching the stars. In that moment, the promise felt like a bridge between two very different worlds, a hope that maybe, someday, humans and Shari could live together in peace. But far away, trouble was growing. The peace on Velaris 9 was fragile. A dark shadow was moving through the galaxy. A group called the Zarkith Union wanted to take control of the planet and its secrets. Soon, the lives of everyone on Velaris 9 would change forever. For now, though, Kellen and Ari only knew the stars and a friendship. The promise was made, and no matter what happened, it would stay in their hearts. Not long after Kellen made his promise to Ari, dark clouds began to gather over Velaris 9. The peaceful planet, once full of laughter and bright colors, now felt heavy with fear. The Zarkith Union, a powerful group from far away, wanted to take control of Velaris 9. They wanted its rare crystals and secrets for themselves. The Zarkith were strong and cruel. They attacked suddenly, with ships that blotted out the sky and weapons that burned everything they touched. The Shari tried to protect their homes, but their peaceful ways made them unprepared for such violence. Kellen's family received urgent orders from Earth. Humans had to leave the planet for their safety. The war was spreading fast, and no one knew how long it would last. Kellen's parents packed quickly, holding him close. Before they left, Kellen ran to find Ari one last time. He wanted to give her the wooden ring again, to remind her of his promise. He found her near the crystal lake, her bright eyes sad but still shining with hope. "I'm leaving," Kellen said, voice shaking, "but I will come back for you. I promise." Ari reached out and took his hand. "I will wait for you," she said softly, "no matter how long it takes." The sky suddenly filled with loud booms and flashes. The Zarkith ships were attacking the nearby village. Smoke rose into the air, and people ran for safety. Kellen grabbed Ari's hand tightly. "We have to go," he said. But before they could leave together, soldiers came and pulled Kellen away. His parents were shouting for him to get on the evacuation ship. Ari's eyes filled with tears as she watched him disappear into the crowd. Kellen clutched the wooden ring in his pocket, holding on to the memory of their promise. He looked back once, hoping to see Ari waving goodbye. But the smoke and chaos swallowed the view. On the ship, Kellen's heart ached. The stars outside looked cold and distant. He was leaving behind the only friend he had ever truly known, and the planet where he had made his promise. Days turned into weeks as the ship traveled through space. Kellen trained hard, learning how to fight and survive. He knew that one day he would need to be strong. For Ari, for Velaris 9, for the promise he had made under the alien stars. Back on Velaris 9, the Zarkith took control. The Shari were forced to live under harsh rules, their freedoms taken away. But some refused to give up. A secret resistance began to grow, led by brave Shari who believed in freedom. Kellen did not know this yet, but he was determined to return. One day, he would come back with more than words. He would come back with a plan to save Ari and their home. And in his pocket, the wooden ring remained, a small, quiet promise of hope. Years passed, and Kellen was no longer a frightened boy. He had grown into a strong young man. The wooden ring, once small and simple, now had a new life. Kellen's father, before he disappeared on a dangerous mission, had given him a special gift, a small metal ring with a tiny crystal inside. It was stronger and more beautiful than the one Kellen had carved. He kept it safe, always in his pocket. Kellen had trained hard on different planets. He learned how to fight, to lead, and to survive in the harshest places. The war with the Zarkith Union had spread across the galaxy, but humans and their allies did not give up. Kellen joined the Terran Vanguard, the best group of soldiers who defended the colonies. The Vanguard was a tough place. Soldiers were trained to be fast, smart, and brave. Kellen quickly became one of the best. His mind was sharp, and his heart was strong. But no matter how many battles he fought, he never forgot Ari or his promise to return. On quiet nights, when the stars shone through the cold windows of the warship, Kellen held the metal ring and thought about Velaris 9. He imagined the blue trees, the glowing lake, and Ari's sparkling eyes. He wondered if she was still alive, waiting like he was. The other soldiers talked about the war, about missions and victories, but Kellen thought only of home. He did not want to be just a soldier. He wanted to be a savior. One day, Kellen received a secret message. It was from a friend he had made on Velaris 9 before the war. The message was short but clear. Shari resistance still alive. Ari is a leader. Help is needed. Kellen's heart raced. This was the chance he had waited for. He asked his commanders for permission to go back. They said no. He was needed at the front lines. But Kellen would not listen. He began to plan secretly. If he could reach Velaris 9, find Ari, and help the resistance, maybe they could end the war. Maybe peace could return. Kellen trained harder than ever. He improved his skills with the newest weapons and technology. He learned to use stealth and strategy, to move quietly and strike fast. He became a ghost on the battlefield. At night, Kellen held the ring tightly and whispered, "I will come back for you, Ari, no matter what." One cold morning, with the stars still shining faintly in the sky, Kellen left the ship without telling anyone. He took only what he needed, a small team he trusted, and the ring that was his promise. The mission was dangerous. If the Zarkith caught him, it would mean death. But Kellen was ready to face anything. Because somewhere on Velaris 9, Ari was waiting, and Kellen was coming home. Kellen's ship cut silently through the cold darkness of space. The stars twinkled far away, but his thoughts were fixed on one place, Velaris 9, the planet he had promised to return to, the home of Ari and the Shari resistance. The journey was dangerous. The space around Velaris 9 was controlled by the Zarkith Union, who had powerful warships and patrols everywhere. Kellen and his small team had to avoid detection. They used the newest stealth technology, making their ship almost invisible. As they approached the planet, Kellen's heart pounded. He looked at the glowing blue forests and the crystal lakes below. The once peaceful world was now covered in smoke and scars from the war. It was hard to believe it was the same place he had left as a child. The ship landed in a hidden valley where a small group of Shari fighters waited. Their leader stepped forward, strong, calm, and with eyes as bright as Ari's. But it was not her. Kellen explained who he was and why he had come. The Shari were cautious but hopeful. The resistance had been waiting for help from Earth, but none had come, until now. He asked about Ari. They told him she was alive, hiding in the crystal forests, leading small groups of rebels. She had become a symbol of hope for the Shari people, inspiring them to fight for their freedom. Kellen felt a new fire inside him. He was here, finally. But he knew it would not be easy. The Zarkith were ruthless and had many soldiers guarding the planet. That night, Kellen and the Shari planned their first mission together. They would strike a Zarkith supply base deep in the forest. It was dangerous, but they needed to prove they were a strong force. Before leaving, Kellen held the ring tightly. It was a reminder of his promise to Ari and the hope for peace. The next day, they moved quietly through the glowing trees. Kellen saw the beauty of Velaris 9 again, but it was shadowed by war. The air smelled of smoke and earth. Suddenly, they were attacked. Zarkith soldiers appeared, firing their energy weapons. Kellen and the Shari fought bravely. Kellen used his training to protect the group, moving with skill and speed. In the chaos, Kellen saw a figure moving through the trees, slender, fast, with sapphire eyes. It was Ari. Their eyes met for a brief moment, full of surprise and relief, but there was no time to talk. They fought side by side, their moves perfectly in sync, like they had never been apart. After the battle, Ari led Kellen to the secret rebel camp. The Shari were tired but hopeful. They welcomed Kellen as a hero from Earth, a sign that the galaxy had not forgotten them. That night, by the light of the stars and fires, Kellen and Ari talked. They shared stories of the years apart, of pain and hope. And Kellen gave her the ring, the metal one with the tiny crystal. "I promised," he said softly. Ari smiled, her eyes shining. "And I waited." Together, they knew their fight was only just beginning. The crystal forests of Velaris 9 were alive with soft light and quiet sounds. The trees glowed faintly in blue and green, and strange creatures moved silently through the underbrush. It was beautiful and dangerous all at once. Kellen and Ari walked carefully along the narrow paths, deep inside the forest. The rebel camp was hidden far from the Zarkith patrols, but the enemy could be anywhere. The resistance fighters trusted Kellen, but many still watched him with suspicion. After all, he was human. Ari led Kellen to a small clearing where a few of the resistance leaders waited. Their faces were tired, their eyes wary. The Shari had suffered much under the Zarkith rule, and they had little hope left. But Kellen's return had sparked new courage. "We need to strike at the heart of the Zarkith," Ari said. "If we can destroy their main supply lines, we can slow their power." Kellen nodded. He knew the risks, but he also knew this was the only way. The longer the Zarkith stayed, the more they would destroy. Together, they planned carefully. Kellen shared ideas he had learned from fighting in many battles across the galaxy. The Shari listened and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win. But the Zarkith were clever. They had spies everywhere, and soon, Kellen's small team found themselves in danger. One night, as they returned to the camp, they walked into a trap. Laser fire lit the sky, and the ground shook with explosions. The rebels fought hard, but the Zarkith soldiers were strong and well-armed. Kellen took charge, directing the fighters with calm and quick decisions. Amid the battle, Kellen spotted a group of children trapped behind a fallen tree. Without hesitation, he ran toward them, dodging blasts and debris. He lifted the tree just enough for the children to crawl free, then helped them to safety. Ari was fighting nearby. When their eyes met, she gave him a quick nod of thanks. They moved like old friends, covering each other, pushing the Zarkith back step by step. The battle was fierce, but the rebels managed to escape into the forest. They lost some fighters, but the spirit of the resistance was alive. After the fight, Kellen and Ari sat by a small fire. The night was cold, but their hearts burned with determination. "I never stopped believing in you," Kellen said softly, holding out the ring. Ari smiled, her voice steady. "And I never stopped waiting." Together, they watched the stars above the glowing trees. They knew the road ahead was dangerous and uncertain, but their promise gave them hope. The war for Velaris 9 was far from over, but now, with Kellen by her side, Ari felt that maybe the impossible could become real. The days after the battle were quiet but tense. Kellen and Ari stayed close to the rebel camp, helping the Shari heal their wounds and plan their next moves. The forest around them hummed softly with life, but danger was never far away. Kellen watched Ari carefully. She was no longer the little girl he had promised to marry under the stars. She was strong, brave, and wise beyond her years. Her sapphire eyes held a fire that could not be put out by war or sorrow. One evening, as the twin suns set and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, Ari took Kellen to a secret place deep in the forest, a hidden garden full of strange glowing flowers and crystal-clear water. It was a place of peace in a world full of chaos. "I want to show you something," Ari said softly. She reached into a pouch and pulled out a small carved stone. It was shaped like a star and glowed with a gentle light. "This is a Shari promise stone. We give it only to those we trust completely." Kellen took the stone carefully. It was warm in his hand, and he felt a connection to the Shari people more deeply than ever before. "I want to keep my promise to you," Kellen said, his voice steady but full of feeling. "No matter what happens, I will find a way to make peace." Ari smiled and placed her hand over his. "The heart remembers what the mind tries to forget. I have waited for you, Kellen, even when everything seemed lost." Their hands touched, and for a moment, the war, the pain, and the fear all seemed far away. It was as if time stopped just for them. But the sound of distant engines broke the silence. The Zarkith were coming. The enemy had found the rebel camp. Kellen stood quickly, his hand still holding the promised stone. "We must be ready." Ari nodded, her eyes fierce. "We fight for our home, for our people." Together, they helped the rebels prepare for battle once more. Kellen's heart beat fast, but he was no longer just a soldier. He was a leader, a symbol of hope for both humans and Shari. As the Zarkith forces approached, Kellen felt Ari's strength beside him. They would face the storm together, united by their promise and their shared dream of freedom. No matter what happened next, the heart remembers, and so would they. The night was dark, but the forest glowed faintly with the light of the crystal trees. Kellen and Ari stood side by side, ready to defend the rebel camp from the incoming Zarkith forces. The air was thick with tension, and the quiet sound of the wind through the leaves. The Zarkith ships had landed at the edge of the forest. Their soldiers moved quickly and silently, trying to surround the camp. But Kellen was ready. He had studied their tactics and prepared traps with the Shari fighters. As the first Zarkith soldiers stepped into the clearing, alarms rang out. The rebels sprang into action. Kellen's voice was calm but strong, giving orders that moved the fighters like a well-trained unit. Ari fought with grace and power, her movements like water and fire combined. The battle was fierce. Laser beams cut through the trees, explosions shook the ground, and the sounds of shouting filled the air. Kellen dodged a blast that could have killed him and fired back, protecting his friends. In the middle of the fight, Kellen saw Ari struggling against a group of Zarkith soldiers. Without hesitation, he rushed to her side, taking down the attackers with quick, precise moves. Breathing heavily, Ari looked at Kellen and smiled. "You came back," she said. "I promised," he replied, his eyes steady. Together, they fought like one. Their strength and trust inspired the rebels, and slowly the Zarkith forces began to retreat. But the victory came with a price. Many rebels were wounded, and the camp had been damaged. Kellen knew this was only one battle in a long war. As the sun began to rise, the forest grew quiet again. Kellen and Ari stood among the trees, looking at the smoke rising from the battlefield. "We have won today," Ari said softly, "but the Zarkith will return." Kellen nodded. "Then we will be ready." He took her hand and looked into her eyes. The promise they made so long ago still lived between them, stronger now than ever. "We will rebuild," Kellen said, "and we will fight until Velaris 9 is free." Ari squeezed his hand. Together, the light of the new day shone on their faces, a symbol of hope in a dark time. The war was far from over, but with each other, Kellen and Ari believed anything was possible. After the fierce battle, the rebel camp was quiet again, but the work was far from over. Kellen and Ari moved among the fighters, helping them heal and plan their next steps. The scars of war were everywhere, but the hope in their hearts was stronger. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the glowing trees, a messenger arrived with urgent news. Deep within the mountains of Velaris 9, there was an ancient Shari weapon, a powerful device hidden for centuries. It was said to have the power to change the course of the war. Kellen listened carefully. If they could find this weapon, it might be the key to defeating the Zarkith Union. But the path to the mountains was dangerous, filled with Zarkith patrols and harsh terrain. Ari looked at Kellen, her eyes shining with determination. "This is our chance," she said. "We must find it." Kellen nodded. "We'll need a small team. Stealth and speed will be important." The next morning, Kellen, Ari, and a few trusted fighters prepared for the mission. They packed light and moved quickly through the forest, avoiding Zarkith sensors and patrols. The journey was hard. The mountains were tall and rocky, with cold winds that cut through their armor. But Kellen and Ari pushed forward, leading their team with courage and hope. As they climbed higher, strange energy filled the air. The Shari weapon was close. Finally, they reached a hidden cave entrance, covered by glowing vines. Inside, the air hummed with power. The team moved carefully, their footsteps echoing on the smooth stone. At the heart of the cave, they found the weapon. It was a large crystal, glowing with bright blue light. It pulsed like a heartbeat, filling the room with energy. Ari reached out and touched the crystal. This power could save our people. Kellen studied the device. We need to learn how to use it. If we control this, the Zarkith won't stand a chance. Suddenly, the cave shook. The Zarkith had found them. Kellen raised his weapon, ready for battle. We must protect the crystal at all costs. The team fought fiercely, defending the weapon against the attacking soldiers. Kellen and Ari worked together, their movements fast and sure. When the last Zarkith soldier fell, the cave was silent again. The crystal pulsed steadily, safe for now. Kellen looked at Ari. This is only the beginning. With this weapon, we have hope. Ari smiled. And we have each other. Together, they prepared to take the secret weapon back to the rebels. The fight for Velaris 9 was about to change forever. Kellen and Ari moved quickly through the forest, carrying the powerful crystal weapon with great care. The glow from the crystal lit their path, and the air seemed alive with energy. They knew this weapon could change everything. But first, they had to bring it back safely to the rebel camp. The Zarkith forces were stronger than ever. Patrols searched every corner of Velaris 9, looking for signs of the rebels. Kellen and his team had to use all their skills to avoid detection. They moved silently, hiding in the shadows of the glowing trees. As they traveled, Kellen thought about how far he had come. From the little boy who promised to marry Ari to the soldier fighting for freedom, he had changed. But his heart had never forgotten that promise. One night, as they camped near a crystal river, Ari spoke quietly. With this weapon, we can protect our home and the Shari people, but we must be careful. The Zarkith will not give up easily. Kellen nodded. We have to be ready for anything. When they finally reached the rebel camp, the fighters greeted them with hope and relief. The crystal weapon was placed in the center of the camp, and its energy seemed to fill everyone with strength. The leaders of the resistance gathered to plan their next move. Kellen and Ari stood together, ready to lead. We will use this weapon to break the Zarkith hold, Kellen said firmly. But it will take courage, and we must fight as one. Ari added, our people have waited too long. This is our chance for freedom. The next days were filled with preparation. Kellen trained the rebels on how to protect the crystal and use its power wisely. The Shari and humans worked side by side, united by hope and determination. Then, the day came. The Zarkith launched a massive attack, trying to destroy the rebel camp and take the weapon. But this time, the rebels were ready. As the enemy approached, Kellen activated the crystal's power. A bright light spread across the battlefield, creating a shield that protected the fighters and pushed back the Zarkith. The battle was fierce, but the rebels fought harder than ever before. Kellen and Ari led charges, their courage inspiring everyone around them. Slowly, the Zarkith began to retreat. The tide of war had turned. When the fighting ended, the camp was battered but standing. The crystal's power had made the difference. Kellen looked at Ari, tired but smiling. We did it, he said. Ari nodded, her eyes shining. This is only the beginning. But now, Velaris 9 has a chance. Together, they stood beneath the glowing stars, ready to face whatever came next. Their promise, their fight, and their hope burned brighter than ever. The war had changed Velaris 9 forever. The once peaceful planet was now a place of scars and memories, but also of hope and new beginnings. Kellen and Ari stood together at the edge of the rebel camp, looking out at the horizon where the twin suns were rising. The crystal weapon had turned the tide, but the battle was not over. The Zarkith Union had been forced to retreat, but they would not give up easily. Kellen knew the fight for freedom would continue, but for the first time, he felt something he had not felt in years. Peace. Ari turned to him, her eyes soft and full of trust. You kept your promise, she said quietly. Kellen smiled and held out his hand. I told you I would come back. She took his hand, and they stood together, the metal ring shining on his finger and the Shari promise stone in her palm. The promise they'd made as children was no longer just a dream. It was real. In the weeks that followed, the rebels began to rebuild their homes and lives. Kellen helped organize new defenses, while Ari worked with her people to heal and grow stronger. Humans and Shari alike began to see a future where they could live in peace. One evening, as the stars filled the sky, Kellen and Ari stood beneath the glowing trees where they had first reunited. The air was calm, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Kellen took the wooden ring he had carved as a boy and placed it beside the metal ring on Ari's finger. "This was the first promise," he said. "Now, I want to make a new one." Ari's eyes widened with hope. "I promise to stand by you, not just as a soldier, but as your partner, to build a future together, one of peace, love, and strength." Ari smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "I promise the same." They embraced, two hearts bound by a promise that had lasted through time, war, and distance. The galaxy was wide and full of dangers, but together, Kellen and Ari knew they could face anything. Their love was a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope and faith could light the way. As they looked out at the stars, Kellen whispered, "I will marry you, Ari, when I grow up, and now I am ready." Ari laughed softly. "I've waited a long time for that moment." Under the shimmering sky of Velaris 9, the little boy's promise was finally fulfilled.